Am I starting, Mark?
Yeah, if you want to take the first like 6 or so, and I can just tap in after you do the style revolution stuff, that would be good.
Perfect. Uh, I hope so. Most of you had a chance to actually look at a little bit at Wax as a software package, what we have already on our Wax site. And I think Marii can probably, while I talk right now, put the link to our Wax site, our main Wax site in the chat. And really short, the too long didn't read version of it is that Wax is a set of Ruby gems that allows you to um, generate a static site using Jekyll, leveraging Jekyll, meant for these kind of digital exhibits, not only of images, but it's mostly so far been designed around images, but in potentially it can be used to also create a digital exhibit slash archive of sound files. I've done as much video. Even there's a great example of it, which is an exhibit, a gallery of visualizations, and I can point you to some of these resources later. But anyways, the connection to IIIF is simple. Let me go back to the slides that are undistracted. The connection to IIIF is simple, which is that since we focused on images, we chose to go down the IIIF route right away in order to support the community, but also to actually start establishing best practices with the people that were going to be doing these projects with us. And what it does differently as a tool is that actually helps you generate the tiles, not on the fly, but pre-generate them, because the ultimate goal is to have this be a static site. So the one thing that it does in terms of IIIF that some of you may consider to be unique and counterintuitive is that it generates the tiles before the game, so that the tiles are already there. All right, so why are we doing this? Why do this at all? So the reason is that we come from a point of view of working with people in Sudan, in Cuba, in Pakistan, in Chile. We work in so many, even Rikers Island here in New York, in the prison where they keep the young people. We work in so many different environments, technological environments, that we needed a solution that was flexible enough for us to actually be able to, cross these boundaries, to make something that would be more accessible to people with low bandwidth, with no internet at all, a government with high censorship, like in Sudan during Bashir's regime, where you needed to have sneaker nets, you needed to do that kind of digital exhibits so that they would work in USB keys, which we have. That one of the first examples of a Wax project we did it was precisely around a corpus of Sudanese women dressed in a way that the government didn't like, as historical pictures of post-independence, and that we needed to create an archive that can bypass the censors by simply creating a copy of it that can live on a USB. Anyways, so this is the main reason why we would want to do this, why we would want to generate the tiles separate than on a dynamic through a dynamic process that takes for granted that we all live in this happy internet that everybody has access to, and that is fast speed, and everybody has unlimited data, which is not the case. So there are other things that Wax takes into consideration in order to be able to meet that need, right? Because that is the ultimate goal, to be able to work in multiple environments. So low bandwidth cost, can live on hard storage. Lower the maintenance cost was an important one for us, because labor problems is not only a feature of like work, humanities work or historical work in Cuba or in Sudan. It's also here. Like, we have staff turnaround always in a place. The richest institutions have problems with like maintaining PHP applications and this kind of things, right? So as we all know. We also wanted to address the issue of control, right? Because, for example, when you deal internationally with a lot of these things, you will find that the question of colonialism is like one of the most important questions. So people are afraid of like, oh, if I collaborate with a German library, does that mean they own my images? Like that's archives are all around the world. In my experience, extensive experience working in the global South, are worried about appropriation, control, giving stuff to Amazon, this kind of stuff. So this is something that allows us to create these environments where there can be complete control of the images. No security vulnerabilities because it's flat files. Obviously, training is another big issue. We wanted to make sure that we actually, whenever we work with partners, that we work. We don't. That not everybody has the time to learn everything. So while the tool, and we're going to talk about how the tool is great for teaching computational skills, not everybody's going to be in that category where they want to learn. So we want a tool in which like we step in as partners, and all they have to do is like fill out a spreadsheet. Can they do that? Most people can without us teaching. In any case, there's more to that, but there's a lot of this thinking that all comes out of like this heterogeneity of the different environments in which we work. How to use universal standards within heterogeneous environments, right? Because that's part of the game. Oh, this slide probably would have been better. Yeah, sorry, my bad. But yeah, this defines what I already told you what wax is, but that's what this. I was looking for stuff like why. Anyways, I'll let Marii handle this one because this is the process. But really quick, what happens is you start with a bunch of images in a spreadsheet, and then by running the gems, you can generate the tiles. You can generate one page, one web page for each of the rows on that spreadsheet. So it allows you to then create this whole website with item pages just based on that spreadsheet and a folder full of images. That's what the gems are supposed to help you with. Obviously, if you want to add narrative and stuff like that, you have to write in Markdown, this kind of prose that people like to add to these websites. And I'm going to conclude with an example. Style Revolution. It's one of the first ones. And this one is an example of wax in the classroom, used in the classroom. So I'm going to talk about two parts. First, I want to actually show you live what the website looks like live. So let me share. Oh, this is the browser already. Let me share with you the website itself. Style Revolution. Oh, it's already in one tab. Here it is. Oh, that was it already. Anyways, Style Revolution is a collection of images of the first fashion magazine in France, Le Journal des Dames et des Modes. It was, in particular, we wanted to capture the dresses, all the dresses in the magazine. So obviously, these kind of websites are very common to digital collections, museums, libraries, archives, etc. They all have the same parts, which is like a browsing page, an item page. The item page obviously has a viewer. You're all familiar with it. I think we're using Leaflet in this case, and it has some metadata, right? These kind of sites also will always have like the search button, and they usually have, I'll return to this in a second, and they usually have some kind of narratives, right? Or the exhibit portion itself, which is like kind of the narrative frame. This one is accompanied by a lot of student work, like a dictionary. This one is an essay using data analysis of the images, which was facilitated by the work that is already there in the IIIF. In any case, let me return to the main part, which is the item page, where we see the leaflet viewer using the images themselves. So just as an example, this is the tiles are there, except they have been pre-generated. So there's absolutely nothing different in here if using a IIIF server and us, other than this is pre-generated. Obviously, our site is a little bigger because it has a lot more JPEGs. But in terms of the user who's going to download this, it's a much better deal for them because they probably have it already all in a USB, or they can just they can pre-generate them themselves based on the folder. Okay, so the teaching part, just to conclude with that before passing it to Marii really quick. In order to do this, because it's Jekyll and because they have to use gems, I am able to teach in a classroom. In order to do this project, I was able to teach in this classroom combined with Marii. Marii would come in and do some lessons, and I would do some others. How to do, like the basics of programming. First, like how to open your terminal, learn like what the differences between graphic user interface and the command line interface. Like start thinking about symbols, start thinking about data structure. IIIF itself is a form of data structure, right? So we get students to actually think about like, oh, you know, data needs to be structured a particular way. And that's the reason why we have standards. But even learn how to do programmatic things, like little tiny programmatic things, like creating a table of contents. Like, oh, that's a for loop. So we start, so we teach them like super basic, like conditionals, for loops, using the language called Liquid, because that's the language that Jekyll uses, which is a rudimentary version of Ruby, if I had to give it a name. But it's super great to teach beginner, super beginner level computation. And all of this, all around just building a specific project, which is always a great pedagogical tool. Whenever you're teaching these things, if they have a specific concrete thing they already want to do, that's going to make your job easier. Like in my experience as a teacher. And this is one of the reasons why I think WAX is great. For those who want to bring it into the classroom. With that, I think I spoke for more than 6 minutes, but I couldn't get it all in. I tried.
Do you want to share the slides again, Alex?
Yeah.
Is that okay? And then I'll have you click through so I can have my notes. But yeah, so while Alex was talking about examples where you're using WAX as a vehicle for teaching, all of those, we hope, pretty agnostic components, basics of metadata, of plain text, and so on. I want to give an example of another project where, rather than teaching being the focus was getting something off the ground really quickly in a almost like skunkworks form. So if you can find the slide after the Style Revolution one, that would be great.
Yeah, it's loading. Let me also share the link to the Style Revolution website so that people can have it in the chat.
Sure. Yeah, and the last slide we have is just all of the links basically too, so we can make sure to share that out as well.
All right, so I'm looking at the slide. I'm looking at this slide?
The one after Style Revolution? Yep, that one. That would be great.
100%. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so for me, in addition to teaching, WAX has been really great for these like urgent collaborations that either don't need or don't want or just can't have institutional buy-in. And that was the case for this site. So this is the Black Solidarity Day exhibit. My colleague Jasmine Sykes-Kunk at NYU kind of conceived this idea and this project last summer during the Strike for Black Lives and Shut Down Academia actions. Jasmine pulled me and some of our special collections colleagues together by early fall with a provocation to make a website that has resources about Black Solidarity Day, and also to have a community curated exhibit that has items from the days past and also present. And we wanted to share this before the actual holiday, which is the day before Election Day. So a really tight and urgent timeline to really collaborate on. So Jasmine, Shannon, and Janet in Special Collections created a Google Sheets of all of the metadata. They worked in Google Docs to work on all of the copy. They made a bunch of scans of all of the images they needed and dropped them into Google Drive, just like quick and dirty, easy, no teaching there, just let's get this done. They passed them off to me, where I was able to make a GitHub repo, use the WAX template, run the tasks to create the derivatives and pages that Alex mentioned that I'll show you a little bit more in a minute. I changed the styling a tiny bit, and then we're done. Like, we're off to the races, and we have this project and product that didn't need a huge amount of buy-in, which was really meaningful, definitely at the time, and another use case that I feel is really important. Could you go to the next slide, Alex? So as an example, here are two of the item pages. On the left is one of our item submissions. We used actually just Google Forms to allow users to submit media and metadata that was structured. This is a submission from an 8th grader named Charles Joyner. He made a presentation on what Black Solidarity Day means to him that I think is really wonderful. That is now part of the collection. On the right, we have an item that's actually from the Smithsonian. And the manifest and IIIF like thumbnail derivatives and metadata are actually being pulled in directly from the Smithsonian's IIIF implementation. So it's just to show how truly flexible this can kind of be, even with it being very rapid. Can you go to the next slide, Alex? So this pretty boring image is pretty much all I did for my work in this. So like when I get the metadata and I get the images and they're in roughly the right shape, I run a couple rake task commands that all at once generate those item pages rather than having a dynamic PHP server do that from a database. I just pre-generate by running this command. I have another command for generating the IIIF derivatives. That one at the top, clobber, gets rid of everything. So if I want to add new items rather than futzing in a manual way, I just destroy them and regenerate them. It's very reproducible. And it's not the most glamorous thing, but that's basically what Wax is running these tasks so I can pass off the appropriate assets to Jekyll for Jekyll to handle. Can you go to the next slide, Alex? So given that this is a IIIF community call, I wanted to bring it back a little bit and just say a few things about what I think that level 0 implementations or static implementations have to offer to the community. So for me, getting to see like the shape of the APIs, I have this image of the GitHub repo with all of the derivatives in their very specific folders on folders that reproduce the actual routes of the API. I think that's unbelievably helpful for folks to click through and see like, oh, here's this tiny tile at this exact spot. Here's where the manifest lives. Like, here's where it's referencing. You know, you can understand that with some of the dynamic implementations, but it's not as tangible. So I think it's really exciting to get to just see the shape as an entry point into the world. I think stuff like this shows that minimal computing principles are not mutually exclusive with engaging UIs and interoperable resources. Wax isn't the most glamorous thing, but when you look through it, like it doesn't feel like a static experience, right? You can use Mirador, you can have faceted browsing, all of these things that seem pretty difficult to achieve are much easier to work with, I think, in a static environment and don't leave the same amount of technical debt. So it's cool to be able to see both. And then this last point, it allows IIIF implementation to be iterative. You know, Alex mentioned earlier some points about almost like sovereignty, where you would want to hold your images separately and have this very minimal workflow. For me, at least at NYU, I can say that we've had implementation of IIIF on the back burner for quite a long time. There's a Cantaloupe instance hanging around. It's kind of working. It hasn't been a huge priority, but in making some of these exhibits, like the Black Solidarity Day exhibit, it's been able to kind of reignite some urgency on look what we can actually do with our collections in a way that has gotten folks excited about implementation. And then it's my not so secret plan to actually, when we have like NYU minted manifests, re-ingest those into Wax the same way that it's pulling from the Smithsonian, right? And then we can be part of the institutional ecosystem very easily. So in short, this is a way that for me is interesting because it allows us to like experiment and charge ahead without creating a lot of technical debt or precluding being folded back into that institutional infrastructure. Yeah, do you want to go to the next slide, Alex? Cool, so we have just resources that we can share here, but I also screenshotted this tweet from Diego Pino just from earlier today that I got permission to share because I think it really speaks to, I think, how we think about Wax. Alex can disagree, but the idea of open source community gardens where we work on this thing and tend to it, knowing that folks can take it where they will and kind of cultivate what they need to for their use case. We're definitely a very small group. We have Code for Lib Slack channel that's just kind of started to really blossom. But I'm excited about where this work is going, I think. Yeah, Alex, do you have anything else before we open it up to questions? Cool. Yeah, I think depending on what folks are most interested in, I think we're both happy to dive into whichever components of that seem like they need more interrogating or worth talking through more.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to get to the questions so that you guys. I think we covered so much in the fastest. I think this is a record, Marii.
It might be too much, but
I know. But we talk really fast. That's good though. But I think because most of you are veterans anyway, so you kind of like we don't need to spell everything out with you guys. Yeah, we have a couple questions.
Yeah, when it comes to doing all the tiles, is the process model someone uploads an image to GitHub and then it gets eaten and spits out the tiles? Where does that happen?
Email.
You could do that. That's definitely a model that you could do. It's so agnostic to what the workflow should be. Like if you wanted GitHub Actions to do that, you absolutely could. For us, like in terms of maintenance, we've definitely taken more of a less is more approach. Like I really like the very linear model of folks work on something. When they say it's done, that's when I download their, Google Drive of all their tiles, and then I run through the process because it's just useful to not have it be too much of a back and forth. But if you want a more dynamic process where people are uploading things and it's generating them kind of on demand, you could absolutely build that in.
Well, I was just sort of thinking of your comment about what resources people have. So if they're needing to generate all of those tiles locally, then obviously they'll need some kind of programming environment installed on a local machine. So that's kind of why I was interested in how that might work as a service, theoretically, of, you upload your image, it gives you back a zip file of all of the tiles and doesn't store your image type thing. And then you've got something to play with. So I'm just sort of, that seems to be starting with a barrier that might stop some people. So that's why I was just curious about, ways in which to minimize that.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're interested in, right? Like for us, and I think Alex can speak to this even more, I think we've definitely fostered a collaboration model where it's not just self-service. Like the relationship of working with somebody who can help with this, going through the documentation, going through our install guides can be a really empowering experience. But if you want a more self-service model, there's room to think about it. It's just not our primary use case, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Alex, do you want to have
move on to Stace? Yeah, so that I think I want to emphasize this this word agnostic that Marii used, because I think fundamentally minimal computing is, even though it doesn't seem like it, it's a conversation that's been going on for like 5 or 6 years on how to reduce computation here, there, everywhere. It's very anti-universalist. So it's very against the idea that we can come up with a universal solution. So what we do is we design this kind of toolkits, a combination of approaches that keeps us at maximum flexibility, so that it can accommodate many different types of social relations. So there can be the social relation where like two people, one of them a programmer and the other one is the expert on the subject. It could be a teacher and students, like what we've done it. It could be like in Sudan, for example, we were collaborating with their IT department there and the historians. It just keeps the sort of roles you can play outside, sort of super flexible, so that we don't have the one model. That is the one model that I inherited, which is the model of we'll create universal tools and it will have just one team of servicing that tool, and it's going to be the users are going to be able to self-serve anonymously. The model you basically said. Yes, that model is available in so many different ways, but this is trying to actually cover all the other gaps that model left behind, right? So that's part of the thing. Let me just really quick before moving into Stace. The whole thing about finite products is also very important the social relations I wanted to establish here at Columbia University that gave staff more power involved getting me to tell faculty that, no, you're not gonna have this thing where you're gonna be able to upload things infinitely according to your own design ideas, and you're gonna have full service all the time. No, I wanted to scope. I wanted them to start thinking about scope creep and actually reduce the size of the shit they were thinking about doing. And sorry, I didn't mean to use that curse word. Reduce the size of their ambitions
Stuff.
to something that is, to something that is a finite product. Like, come on, man, you were doing books and articles on paper 20 years ago. Like, we don't have the staff to keep on security, maintenance, and all these other stuff. So this helps us. This tool actually has allowed me to actually set up barriers and boundaries with people around here. Like, and I'm talking about real life. Like, I have been able to actually get people to sign off on, like, I'm gonna be done with my images in 1 year. I'm gonna do my spreadsheet. This is it, right? Which the other model does. The other model leaves the door open for, like, oh yeah, then I'll be able to upload new images forever, right? This kind of thing. So Stace.
First, your commentary is wonderful. I think this is your point is well taken, particularly from the perspective of those who are interested in long-term preservation of these sorts of digital scholarly objects and the ability to sort of package up very discreetly an archive of some sort and preserve it for posterity, whether or not the technology behind it still supports its active use. I've always thought these things have a 5-year lifespan, and we need to start building in the ability to compact these things after that lifespan, so that at least the content and code is preservable. And I think this is wonderful. The question I had was, you mentioned that you've used this package as an opportunity to teach coding and other things in your curriculum, and I was just wondering if you could share any curriculum that you have that you've created around this particular package, because that's exactly the what I'm looking for in relation to this grant that we're talking about supporting in the spring. So that would be really useful to be able to look at that curriculum and see how we can sort of fit the use of this into our own sort of boot camp curriculum.
I think we have done. We did. Me and Marii have taught a 1 week intense course, and we've also taught the other version, which is the, like, just attaching ourselves to as a laboratory to an existing course. Like the fashion one was just like students came to lab, right? So I think we can dig out the syllabus for that, the fashion one, but I think it'll be easier to dig out the one for the 1 week course.
We're also teaching it again remotely soon, which will require much more thorough and deliberate materials for sure, because it will be remote. So that's hopefully something that we can share soon. The wiki, I think, is a pretty solid start for what it's worth. But I mean, also just in truth, like, that's the type of stuff that I'm hoping will emerge from the community going forward. I think in the first year or so, we kind of had a, like, this thing has been cool for us, let's release it and see what happens kind of attitude. And then in the years since, it's been like, how can we learn from what people are actually doing, like solicit things like recipes or curricula. And so that's where we're at right now. Like, I totally agree that that's necessary. It just doesn't exist quite yet, because I think that's the next phase, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and a quick note on the maintenance thing, because I think Marii and I and others at our lab, we have this conversation all the time. And I think we're making a historical gambit here. There's two kinds of approaches to long-term preservation of these things, so that they're not 5 years only, which I'm pretty sure 80% of people think, oh, it's just 5 years only, and that's it, we can't do anything. So that was like Trevor Owens, who wrote the book on digital preservation. I just had this conversation with him on Twitter. He was like, I just assume everything is just 5 years, whatever. And that's great, the guy who wrote the book. So there's two approaches. The Yale approach is like, we're going to create, emulators for everything, and we're just going to preserve the emulators. And to me, that approach is just like turtles upon turtles, because it's like, what about the operating system to run the emulators? Our gambit is the other one, which is like, well, why don't we make a gambit on like maintaining historically tested formats like plain text? What if we, instead of saying we're going to maintain software, we just produce archival versions of things in what history has shown us already, not what we imagine is going to happen, but in what history has shown us already has been around, which is has like since the 60s, at least the current iteration of plain text without taking into consideration encoding has been is a solid gambit. So a lot of what this is a lot of plain text. This is a massive amount, besides the JPEGs themselves, it's a massive amount of plain text. And that's our gambit, right? Flat files, so that we maintain files, not documents, files with historical promise of longevity.
There was a question in the chat that I wanted to get to, if that's okay, Alex.
Yeah.
Tracy had asked about incorporating data from other institutions, like in the Smithsonian example. This is something that I want to write a recipe about very soon, and I hope I'll share. The long short of it is those rake tasks that you run that pre-process the data, whether it's creating the individual pages or creating the IIIF resources. What they do is basically just append information to your original spreadsheet, saying like column, manifest, and then it will give that local manifest it created. If you have a remote manifest that you want to use, all you do is create a column called manifest where you stick that actual one that you're pulling in, and do the same for like the thumbnail you want to use to make the theme work from, you know, within the manifest itself. And then you can have a kind of hybrid where you do that for some of them, leave it empty for others, generate the tasks, and it will fill in the blanks. Does that answer your question?
Because it's combined with
Yes.
Jekyll, it is, so besides the IIIF component of creating derivatives, this other gem that does the kind of converting a spreadsheet into individual pages that can be used by by Jekyll in order to create web pages. It's really powerful because Jekyll allows data to come in through other pipes, and you can actually combine it with the spreadsheet, whatever you put in the spreadsheet. So for example, I've used links to YouTube videos as one of the columns. And then with that, creating a viewer for the YouTube videos on the other side, on the Jekyll side of the house, I've been able to actually bring in a bunch of YouTube videos. I've done the same with sound files recently in a project on oral history. With a bunch of oral histories, we just put them on SoundCloud because it's expensive to host them. And did the same. So the idea is that the flexibility is enormously powerful if you can imagine a way to leverage the conversion from a spreadsheet, from anything that's tabular. If you can imagine how to bring tabular to documentary, then the sky's the limit. I've been able to bring in so much stuff of different varieties using this. And we have examples of ones in which we've connected to other IIIF, like at the liturgical. I have a website that combines stuff at Columbia with stuff at the Met, that brings them together for their IIIF with our IIIF. Remember, because in that column you can even have like true false values. Like you can even have like booleans that tell you to behave one way when you encounter this row and behave another way when you encounter the other row. All of these things are super possible. I really like wax. You can tell. I probably should tone it down. It's done so much good for us in the past, like what, 3 or 4 years? I have been able to do so much with it. I'm building right now. I'm also in the process of building a theme for faceted browsing, because that was a lot of people asked for this kind of like functionality that you get with Blacklight, that or like Amazon, you know, like if you like on the side is like filtering down to the when you're browsing in the browsing page. Right now, off the shelf, it does like just a simple filter. But people wanted to have very complicated filters, so right now we're working on that. But this is the kind of thing that we want the community, like the more people that, the more ideas people have, the more the ecosystem can enrich itself. Like I want, at some point, I want to, after this one, I want to work on a thing for, I don't know if I'm going to do a Mirador or a leaflet, but I want to work so that you can actually control changing pages from within the viewer itself. Things like that. You know?
So does anyone else have any other questions for Marii and Alex?
Thank you, John. Yes.
Are you, I mean, this isn't for this. I mean, we did a presentation about a different process of trying to simplify some of these things. It's not, it's actually completely different from what you've done. But again, it's a minimal computing approach. I wasn't going to go into the detail here because we did discuss about it in a different community call. I was just wondering if you wanted to know about it, and then you can have a little look if you didn't know about it. It's just a little system we did called Simple Site. It's up on GitHub. I can give you a link. This was trying to, again, it was commenting on a number of those issues of trying to give people the power to do stuff themselves. But as I said, yeah, we talked about this in a different community call, so I won't go into big details, but it was just purely, if you hadn't heard of it, it'd be quite nice. Because I've been curious about how Jekyll or some of the things about, say, producing those tiles, these sorts of things might allow people to do more with what we're trying to do. Because at the moment it presents a workspace for people to play with other people's IIIF resources. But if we could combine it with the notion of generating tiles and IIIF level 0 presentations, then it would allow people to do the whole thing themselves. So I'm quite curious to see how that might work.
Yeah, for sure. There's also there's a few other groups who do adjacent things, which is really nice to be a part of. Like there's folks at the University of Idaho who have a very similar thing, just non-IIIF, so it's even simpler. But this type of thinking it's been exciting to see how many overlaps there are. So it's definitely always good to know about, you know, more things to look into. That group is actually curating the equivalent of like an awesome list for this stuff. So it can be kind of, you know, registry of things to look at. So we could definitely think of sharing that.
This one is great. I'm looking at it right now. I like that. And we've had similar conversations about using JSON to leverage everything, but I think that the fact that CSV is still an option there for a lot of what we do is, I think it's going to be important for a lot of people.
JSON is a stumbling block because it's so easy to break it. If you're looking at lowering barriers to people, JSON is an issue. I mean, I've had a look at JSON editors and stuff, whether you could drop them in, so you give people forms instead. But yeah, simplifying things down to flat text, it does make life easier for people. And that does make sense.
The other thing is that I think it's important to point out is that another one of our gambits in terms of making stuff accessible to people is that Marii and me are firm believers in teaching, and I think at the end of the day, what I want to really make a lot of young people enthusiastic about learning simple coding skills, having simple coding skills, not to become programmers necessarily. Like I have a PhD in English. I cannot program as good as Marii can, but I can do simple stuff that gives me so much power. And I think if our GLAM professionals in the future, and our faculty and our researchers of the future, and our GLAM professionals of the future, if not all, but if like half of them have some simple basic skills, like the kinds of skills that you would need in order to build a wax site, which I swear are not that big compared to like full stack programming, I think that can go such a long way than trying to make a historical gambit where we're just going to make services that run universally on a browser to graphic user interfaces, but that depend on maintenance, on some team being funded by some institution to maintain them. Because those are the ones that in my lifetime, I'm almost 50, that I've seen fail too many times. Like I've seen the lack of funding, even open access or closed access. I've seen both sides of the house crumble over the years with that. So that I think for the profession itself, because I do care about cultural heritage, I think the gambit is an increased amount of teaching of basics, which WACS, I think, facilitates. And I think that's where we're putting our chips, you know.
The quote that Marii shared in the chat was really nice, and I just wanted to call it out so that it's on the recording. And it was build what you'd want to teach and build what you'd want to maintain as guiding ideas. Very nice. So we are about at time. Thank you both for joining us and for presenting and just leading a great conversation. I will post the recording once it's processed from Zoom into the notes document. So if anyone wants to share it, or you know, if you missed something, you can find it there. So thanks again. Thanks for everyone for joining us and for all your questions. And we will be back in 2 weeks for the next call. And I think we're going to be joined by folks from the visual geometry group at Oxford then. So you can check out the calendar to see what's there. So yeah, thanks all. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks for having us.
Bye, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.